What is going on? We are live. It is the week 8 live stream or podcast, depending on how you're listening to us. I appreciate it. It is the Vampire Fantasy Football Forum. We are finally in week 8 prep mode. This is not going to be the typical waiver wire show. I know for most leagues, waivers ran last night, so we're a little bit late on that, and that's actually okay. I was not fully feeling this week's waiver wire, so I decided to be doing something a little different this week's. Most weeks for waiver wire shows, I will break down looking at what the who's on the waiver wire and what it looks like for you. Who should you pick up based on the roster percentages? But there are a lot of people out there that do that already. I did not want to be that way this week. I wanted to try something different. Okay. And it's waiver wire shows are pretty typical reactive for information. It's mainly reactive based on what players have done the previous week or maybe the previous weeks. That's a very reactive thing. So the most recent waiver wire darling was Kenneth Walker. And when this guy was a waiver wire darling, I didn't disagree with it. I actually said it. But I don't think he should have been somebody that was so hot to pick up because I think in my opinion, he was somebody that should have been already on your team. Yes, it was a good move. If you're able to go get him, add him to your team, it was a good move. You like it. He has been, a really good asset for your team. So this week, rather than coming on here and giving you a list of names that, you can come back with, yeah, well, he's not available in my league, or, this list is too on the margins. Why would I drop somebody for a guy that, it's not really going to help me? You're nuts for thinking that this player that you're telling me is going to do well or that I should go pick up is actually going to do well. Fair point. So rather than being like everybody else and talking about fantasy football as they talk about it, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go team by team. We're going to go as fast as we can. This might take a bit, but we're going to go as fast as we can. We're going to see who is out there on the waiver wire where I might add them, who maybe a player that I have that I want to, trade away, and who maybe that I may not have on my roster and I want to acquire. So let's begin. We're going to start from the top. It's Arizona. Right now, I would not drop Hollywood Brown. Not yet. I know he's going out. He went on IR. He's out for at least 4 weeks, 3 more. And for those that had Hollywood Brown, you were enjoying a great start to the season. He was seeing double-digit targets on average. We saw Hopkins fulfill that role. So now the thought is maybe, I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. But it is that transition between Hopkins and Brown, it came fast, which is good. But I would not be taking Brown off your roster yet. A guy that I might trade for is Rondell Moore. I don't think that Hopkins is going to sustain a 50% target share from 1 week to the next. I don't think that's a sustainable number. Okay, it's a bit of a risk if you want to try to acquire more, but the price tag, and I hate using that term, but I don't have a good one off the top of my head, but what you'd have to give up to trade for him is not a lot, or he might be on the waiver wire, some shallow leagues. Okay, it is a risk, I understand, but Moore should run more out of the slot in weeks to come. Hopkins won't take all of that workload from him, so that would be a guy I'd be targeting if I could. The current fantasy manager for Rondell Moore is probably very frustrated. It won't take more than bench assets to go get him, if anything like that. So this is where, if you pay attention to detail, you look beyond what they've scored. This is how, while it's taking a risk, this is what separates you and your league mates from winning a championship. Okay. Hopefully you picked up Eno Benjamin. I had talked about him weeks and weeks and weeks before James Conner got injured. Okay. Hopefully this is somebody that you had already picked up. He is rostered in 68% of ESPN leagues. If you want the guy to be the next man up while Connor is out, and I know Connor's probably coming back soon, it is Eno Benjamin. I'm sure he has actually solidified more of a role than what he had previous while Connor was there before. And if you want a stash for a very deep league, it's Keontae Ingram. That would be the guy after Benjamin. For Atlanta, if you play in 1 QB leagues, Mariota is a streaming quarterback, but that is it. It is a run-first offense that's a lower play per game offense. So it's going to depend on what the opponent is or who the opponent is. But again, they were down 28-17 and down most of the game this past week against the Bengals, and they only passed 13 times. So it's very, 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 very limited opportunity. It's frustrating, but he is a streaming potential as well. If you have the league manager or the team manager that has Cordell Patterson on IR and they're needing a win right now, it might be a time to see what the price tag or what the offer would need to be. And again, I've talked about trades a little bit before. It's good not to just throw out an offer, feel them out, find out what it would take to acquire certain players. This is a one where if Cordell is the right price and I don't have to give up a whole lot off of my team to get him, I'm going to go acquire him right now. Again, this is a run-first offense, and yes, it's a risk. You're acquiring a player off of an injury. That is a risk. You are assuming some risk here, so you have to play that into when you're talking to your league mates about potential trades. If it's a player, that has to be factored in. Well, it's a risk, so I'm not going to give you, what you think he should be worth if he is fully healthy, because there's a risk. Okay? But prior to injury, he was the main guy for Atlanta. Okay, while Patterson's been out, it's been the Tyler Algier and Caleb Huntley show in the backfield. Between the two backs, Algier is the starter, but Atlanta has made it clear that when Huntley is in, they use him. He had a pretty high percentage share when he was used for Atlanta the past 2 games. Honestly, Huntley's really a deeper league stash, but you're really not doing a whole lot unless Algier goes down, and if that's before Patterson returns. For pass catchers, it's London, it's Pitts, and it's frustrating. If you have either of those, you're frustrated. There's potential with both, and it's frustrating. Don't go after any other pass catcher in Atlanta. Enough said. Baltimore. Oh, what do we do with this backfield? Man, first, poor J.K. Dobbins back on IR. And we do certainly hope. We never wish injury upon players, especially ones that look like they're going to have a promising career like J.K. Dobbins does. But you should not drop him. Should not do that. Do not drop him. Okay? First and foremost. But who's the lead back in this backfield? I know, yes, you get cute on me. It's Lamar Jackson. Duh. Yeah, I know. Jokes aside, 1 week it looks like it's Gus Edwards. This past week, week before that's Kenyon Drake. Who is it? So the answer is we don't know. Okay, so you have one person that says, well, now it's Gus Edwards, and it is Gus Edwards. Well, maybe. Kenyon Drake also has led this backfield too. And they've not been playing well as a team. So this is frustrating. You use either of these backs, you're at your discretion. Okay, if you have them, you don't drop them. You use them at your discretion where you need to. Plug and play where you need to, in my opinion. On a deeper level, remember, though, Justice Hill was slowly working out Kenyon Drake. Okay, before he injured his hamstring, Justice Hill was a thing that was working Kenyon Drake out. On to the pass catchers. This is the time to acquire, see what it's going to take for Rashad Bateman. Again, he's coming off injury, should not pay full price for what he is, okay? I would also not add Devin Duvernay, okay? For pass catchers, it's Bateman, and that's it as far as wide receivers go. For tight ends, we'll get to that. I have a surprise for you here with Baltimore's tight end. But Baltimore has a really favorable schedule down the stretch for wide receivers, so I would be acquiring Bateman, but at a discounted price if possible. Again, feel your league mates out. Run it by what you think is a good offer. If they don't like it, if you aren't benefiting in acquiring them, but you pay too much, don't do it. So here is the hot take that I have. I know if you have Andrews at tight end or if you have Kelsey at tight end, you love the position. That's a difference maker other than having Taysom Hill. I know. But the difference between Kelsey and Andrews is the offense. Kelsey plays on Kansas City. They're a pass first offense, where Andrews plays in Baltimore, where it's run first led offense. And the play style is going to hurt Andrews every once in a while. I get it. This last week was one game. He is also injured right now, and he has potential not playing this week as well. If you could get a trade done where you're trading away Andrews for the name value, and you get, let's say, Goddard plus Singletary, or Goddard plus somebody else that you need on your team, you fulfill your tight end position. And yes, it's not as good. That's why you acquire somebody else as well. I think that's a win. And that's a hot take. I get it. But I would be looking to trade away Andrews right now if I could. He is going to have some of those weeks that we just saw as well. It's not going to be just 1 week. In Buffalo, again, you don't need me to tell you. Yeah, Josh Allen's great. Stephon Diggs great. Devin Singletary, Gabe Davis. Those are the players you need to have. Dawson Knox is a late tight end that you might still have. You might be streaming him. You may have moved off of him, though, too. I don't know. Who am I looking at adding on this team? Well, if he's out there, it's Isaiah McKenzie. And if Isaiah McKenzie's hurt, it's Khalil Shakir. Those two are the two slot receivers for Buffalo. These are the guys that I want, that, and I'm going to take a flyer on. I want the third option in a high-flying offense. Buffalo is a high-flying offense. I will take that all day long. In the running back positions, I'm really not on Moss or James Cook. Playing time production, they don't match what's there. If anything, it's a handcuff, but I take Cook over Moss. But honestly, it's a very, 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 very speculative ad. It's deep league. It's potential of Singletary potentially getting hurt. We don't bet on injury either. Carolina Panthers. Well, no more CMC in Carolina. We'll talk about him when we get to the 49ers. For now, you only need to look at the box score, or for now, if you only look at the box score or the final score, the fantasy football production you see from this backfield is, well, Deontay Foreman runs this backfield. I would disagree. I think Chuba Hubbard is going to split. He was injured slightly in this past game. He did not play as much. He is the better pass catcher in this game. He would have been somebody I would have said, look, if he's better than some of your options and you need running back production right now, Chuba Hubbard's a guy. Yes, he's going to split with Deontay Foreman, but Chuba Hubbard's probably the one that you will have more value with right now. But it's gross, and I get that. Okay? It's a split backfield, and it's a non-explosive offense. You might have better options. Okay? DJ Moore finally came to life. Finally. And I think he's going to continue doing that. He's got the potential to still be at least a flex or wide receiver too. Everybody else, I'm out. Don't worry about him. And the Bears. So is Fields a reliable streaming quarterback? In single quarterback leagues? Maybe not. There are probably some other options that might be better. He might be, though. In 2 QB leagues, yep, I think it's a real sneaky play. Now, you watch the game against New England. Fields looked like a discount version of Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts. He ran the ball well. He threw decent. He threw okay, but he still has work to do. This week's going to be a little bit tough with Dallas, but we're going to get to the preview show later this week. So we'll dive more on that matchup later. And I get it, though. It's a tough matchup this week, but he's coming around. He's averaging a lot more runs the past 4 games, which is helping his production fantasy-wise. The backfield runs through Montgomery. I know Montgomery was injured, and yes, when we see it, Herbert is a better runner. Khalil Herbert looks like the better back in this backfield, but we saw it last year. We saw it again this year. When Montgomery is healthy or semi-healthy, it runs through him. Herbert is a handcuff stash that has maybe potential, but it's very limited upside while Montgomery is healthy. Similar to an Atlanta pass catchers, I'm honestly only looking at Darnell Mooney for this. If I have a pass catcher for Chicago, everybody else, you're not going to know when, okay? And since we can't know when one of these guys has a really good matchup because of volume, okay, this is more of a volume play of why we won't know when. It's better to not try and guess and go for the 0 and say, well, had I known that, well, yeah, sure. Had we known all of it, we would have all won fantasy football. That's a no brainer. Cincinnati, Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Mixon. Those are all guys that are all rostered and all definitely should be. You don't need me to tell you that. In most leagues, Tyler Boyd is already rostered too. And if not, you still need to add him. Okay. He will have flex value in most leagues as well. Okay. Yes, he's a third option, but we talked about traded Michael Thomas for Brandon Ayuk in the chat. Thanks for the question, Tanner. If you traded Michael Thomas for Brandon Ayuk, that's a win. I don't know if Michael Thomas comes back this year. And if he does, I don't know if you really start him in most formats. He's really not trustable. And Brandon Ayuk is seeing a larger target share in Seattle or in the 49ers offense. So yeah, I would say that's a win there. So yeah, that's a good trade. Way to pivot off and use a guy's name value for getting some production there. So great question. Love it. Let's see. Oh, back to the Bengals. Yes, back to the Bengals. Tyler Boyd is going to have flex value. He's going to have some weeks where he's not usable. He's going to have some weeks where he is. But you want the third guy on a high-flying offense. You have to pick and choose which guys are the ones you want to acquire if they're a third option on a team. For Mixon, if you can trade away Mixon right now and use his name value for something to get another running back plus something else that may have a better schedule rest of the season, that is a move that I would say make. It's probably not a popular move, and if you have to just write it out, I get it. Sometimes you have to write out hard things. But it's trending down for Joe Mixon here. Samaje Perine is the handcuff, but really, I'm not doing anything unless an injury happens. Then I'll scramble and see if I really want to on that one. For tight end, Hayden Hurst is a streaming option, but that's about 3/4 of tight ends. It's a dumpster fire. It's gross. So a lot of these tight ends you hear me talk about are going to be streamers. For Cleveland, you don't need me to tell you. It's Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Amari Cooper. Those are the ones that, that's a no-brainer. Brissett is kind of a QB rental and maybe more two QB leagues person. Till Watson comes off suspension, they're stuck with Brissett. So, but if Watson's out there on your waiver wire, go get him. Go add him and wait. Let's just see. Okay. Unfortunately, Njoku is injured and he's out for a few weeks. So he was a darling late tight end draft pick that we loved. It was great to see him do well. So Harrison Bryant gets the nod if you need, again, in the dumpster fire tight ends, a streaming option there. If you think Kareem Hunt gets traded, this is the time to go see what it would cost before his value potentially goes up. He's been wanting traded for a few years, though, so I don't know if that's going to happen or not. The player that I really am excited about, especially for later in the year and when Watson comes back, is Donovan Peoples-Jones. He already has value as the number 2 pass catcher for Cleveland. He has some sneaky value this week. And as a field stretcher, especially with Watson, he could get you a 4-10 and 2 touchdown game. He can also get your 2 catch and 50-yard game too. I get that. But boom opportunities are there more often. Dak is back in Dallas. The unfortunate part of the Cowboys for some games, fantasy purpose-wise, if you're a Cowboys fan, you love this, but fantasy purpose-wise, their defense is really good. And that actually limits potential of what their offensive weapons can do, right? It was a limited offense with Cooper Rush at QB. The offense did run through Zeke, but I think it runs better when it's not running through Zeke. The defense plays well, though. And if the defense is playing the right type of offense like we saw last week, it limits the upside. That's not a bad thing football-wise. They're winning football games. But fantasy-wise, yeah, it's kind of a bad thing. But we play through that, though. We do play through that. Zeke is hurt. It's an MCL sprain, I think is what I saw. So monitor that. But I'm still trying to sell Zeke. I'm still trying to trade him away if I can. Use that name value. Use the fact that Jerry Jones loves him. This offense runs through Zeke. But this is also a time then Pollard. Go get Pollard. Although you probably can't because the guy that has him loves him too much. He's not going to be the right price to acquire him. That's okay. I would still be playing Pollard, especially this week. At wide receiver, Lamb is the startable wide receiver. He's the number one option, especially with Dak back. He should see more targets. He could start becoming that target lead. He is one of few wide receivers that has a sustainable 20% target share every week on a football team. Gallup is probably the last one I'll mention. I know Schultz is coming back, so if you have him, he's probably as good as any streaming option as you could find. But he is coming off injury, so just keep in mind of that. Gallup's going to be more of a kind of game by game. And again, it's a game by game of what do you think he's going to do or not. And then Denver, let's go down to Denver from Dallas. Boy, Denver's offense. I'm sorry, Broncos fans. This is a dumpster fire. And I talked with somebody that is a Denver fan and asked him what's wrong. And he said, well, that's the $245 million question. You know what I'm talking about then. But if Wilson's back, I mean, I guess it's an upgrade. So, yeah, upgrade there. But hey, we'll see what goes on. Especially if Wilson's back and it's not Brett Rippon there. I like Sutton over Judy. It goes back to number one wide receivers, whether it's Russell or Rippon throwing the ball, especially if it's Rippon. I like Sutton more than Judy week by week. For this backfield, it is awful. It kind of gets a little less awful because the offense now only has to deal with Gordon and or Latavius Murray. But again, do you want to deal with either of those guys? So you're kind of playing it, roulette with who's going to actually do something. Greg Dulcich, the next man up, streamer. Here we go. Detroit. Well, Detroit's a fun offense, and when they're not facing a heavy pressure top defense, they can score points. The only two teams that have done this and stopped them on it are Dallas and New England so far. So it's a fun offense to watch. It's also fun when their players aren't hurt, or all their players aren't hurt. We haven't seen Jameson Williams come off IR yet. We're hoping for that yet this season. DJ Chark is still on IR. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's not going on IR, which I commend him for that. But at the same time, he's going to be potentially limited on what he's able to do because he's playing hurt. That hurts him. Goff is still a streamer, though. Goff is still a streamer, whether it's one QB or especially two QB leagues. Detroit was the fourth highest scoring team, or the highest scoring team after 4 weeks, and they faced two tough defenses, so that's brought them down a little bit, but they score touchdowns. They still know how. You're playing Swift. You have Jameson or Jamal Williams as well. Those are not questions. While the Lions are dealing with wide receiver, give me 1 sec. I'll get back to your question. Let me finish my thought. But while the Lions wide receivers are getting healthy, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds are sneaky guys to have and play when needed. This week's actually a good potential week for that if you need that. You don't need me to tell you to have Hawkinson. Should I trade Pittman for Najee and Goddard in a deep PPR league? Starting tight end is Hill. Ooh. So I'll take a pause here. I'll deal with, so if it's Taysom Hill, that's your starting tight end, I would keep Pittman. I would not trade for Najee. It also depends on what your running back situation is, but Hill has the potential, yes, of getting you a 0 or a 3-point game. He also has the potential of going off for 30 because with most tight ends, you do look at snap share, and that is something you take into consideration for snap share. What does the snap share look like for them? With Taysom Hill, he can have a less of a snap share, but still provide value because he's not taking all of his snaps from a tight end sole position. He takes them at running back. He takes them at quarterback. He'll take them at tight end. So you could have a tight end in Taysom Hill that on let's say he gets 16 snaps out of a week. He's playing 2 out of, he gets 2 to 3 routes that he runs. He rushes for 5. He's throwing for another 4. And, you get potential touchdowns to be scored in at least 3 different ways. So 3 and 4, I get it. You're kind of, looking at, I need a win because playoffs are coming. We're about halfway there. One of the things I actually look at for my fantasy teams is not necessarily record, although records are important. But I look at how many points I'm scoring against, the league itself. I have one league that I'm in. It's a pretty deep league, and I'm actually highest scoring. I'm only 4-3 though. I don't even lead my division, but I'm the highest scoring team. That means I've also had teams that have scored high against me. So you're trusting the process on that. Pittman's going to get better. So I'm going to talk about Pittman here a little bit, but what I will highlight on that is Pittman has the Tom Savage corollary. What that is back in the day with Houston, Tom Savage was the quarterback. You may not remember who he was. You might remember who he was. If you do, props to you. But the consensus at the time was DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins still was a league leader in wide receiver receptions, yards, all of that, with Tom Savage as his quarterback. So I'm taking that with Pittman. He is a good wide receiver. He is a good athlete. Number one wide receivers in their offense with a backup quarterback are the ones that continually get targets. I'm out on getting Campbell. I'm out on getting Alec Pierce. I will hold them. I'm not chasing their production for the past couple weeks, though, because this is an offense that is limited. They have Taylor. They have Pittman. Those are the two I want to start week in, week out. I'm chasing if I play Pierce or if I play Paris Campbell. I need to see it from Brett Ellinger first from Indianapolis. So I would keep Pittman. I know he's been frustrating down. I actually have Pittman in a lot of leagues because I'm there. But he's shown you he hasn't scored the touchdowns this year yet. So touchdowns should come. Touchdown variance should come in a positive way for Pittman. So I am out, and I don't like to have Najee. So I feel like you're better off to keep Pittman. You ride it out, and I get they're going to be up and down weeks with Taysom Hill. I get it. But when he goes, when he has a very high game, it's like having Kelsey. It's like having Andrews. It's that difference maker for your team. Trust the process. Don't panic. And I might be wrong. You can come back on here and tell me I was wrong on that and I should have taken it, but that's my opinion. And I have all those guys in leagues that I'm in. So these are decisions I've had to make as well. So yeah, just trust it. And if it's wrong, I do apologize. But in my opinion, that's why I would keep the way it is. I think it's going to get better. So in Green Bay, going down Green Bay, I really don't like anything about Green Bay. If you have Aaron Rodgers, I hope you don't start him. And if you do, I apologize. That's not fun. If it's super, super deep, like a 16-team league, you're probably starting him, but it's still not fun. Aaron Jones is really the only running back you're going to start on this team. And if you have A.J. Dillon, he's on your bench, and that's about it. Allen Lazard is hurt, and that means it's probably Romeo Doubs. That's the number one, Sammy Watkins, but I really don't like either of them because, yeah. Tunyon is fun, and again, like 3/4 of tight ends, he's streamable, but he might be the most reliable target with Lazard being down. So not a lot to say about Green Bay. Houston's a fun team to watch. They are scrappy. That is for sure. They are scrappy. And it doesn't matter game script. They tend to do the same thing over and over, which makes guys like Dameon Pierce really fun, really good, and valuable. I hope they don't change up based on what game strip is, because then Pierce loses some of his value, but we'll see. Mills is a good 2 QB streamer QB, depending on the week, though. You're not starting Burkhead. The only wide receivers you're starting are Nico Collins, potentially, and that's matchup based. But Brandon Cooks is a very much a yes. You start him. I am not looking at any of the tight ends, though, for Houston. In Indy, I spoke a lot about this with the question that we had about Pittman and this offense, gave the, why I like Pittman so much. So I'm going to kind of breeze through some of Indianapolis. Sam Ehlinger, he might have spot starts. This week's probably one of those. You could start him and actually do pretty good. You don't know what to do with trusting him. Matt Ryan didn't look good. So if Ehlinger looks better than that, it might not be much, but it's still a little bit better. So that's good. It's positive. You obviously don't love it if you have Pittman, but I'm not out on him yet. And for the reason I gave previous, that's why I'm not out on him yet. And it's also why I am out. I'm not playing Alec Pierce. I'm not playing and chasing with Paris Campbell. I'm in on Pittman. That's the only pass catcher I'm in on. You're obviously in with Jonathan Taylor, especially with the QB change. You are in with Jonathan Taylor. You don't have to have me there. I'll tell you that there. So I'm out on the tight ends. Naheem Hines is a stash. Deion Jackson is the backup. It's the handcuff. Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence is not, breaking news, he is not the next Peyton Manning. He is also not trash. He's somewhere in between. It's probably around Kirk Cousins, if I'm honest. If you're in a 2QB league, you should have him on your team. He should not be on the waiver wire. But if not, he is a streamer. We saw James Robinson get traded to the Jets. Saw that happen. And what does this mean for Travis Etienne? Oh, baby, if you have Etienne, if you waited, if you were patient, if you saw what was coming, even when James Robinson was there, this is exciting. Your patience is about to pay off. Travis Etienne could be what Breece Hall was doing this year. It's exciting. Get excited. Do not trade him away. If you want a backup, don't go after JaMychal Hasty. Go after Snoop Connor. That'll be the guy I believe would be a better chance at being the backup to Travis Etienne on this team. You have Christian Kirk, or somebody does, and I'm not necessarily saying this is an acquire or even trade away. It kind of depends on what your team needs would be, but yeah, that would be my. I think there are good days there. A guy that I like, and even shallow and some deeper leagues is available is Zay Jones. He's being targeted as much as Christian Kirk. He hasn't produced it yet, but those are coming. Not this week, but they're coming because this week they face Denver. Denver's a tough defense. Still stream Evan Ingram in Kansas City. And yep, going to a bye. So what's the advice? Oh, any players I can get next week? Nope. Get them now. Don't wait because everybody else wants them next week. Get them this week. Go after them this week. That is what puts you ahead of your league mates. That is what's going to get you to where you are winning on the margins against your league mates. I did it this week with one of the KC guys. I'll tell you who in just a minute. Of course, it's Mahomes and Kelsey. Those are the guys that's like no-brainers. Wow, duh, everybody started them. Juju's probably also on somebody's team as well because he's starting out to produce. All three running backs are probably on somebody's team. All three running backs probably can't start anymore. I know Isaiah Pacheco was listed the starter. This is a three-headed show in Kansas City, and real football-wise, that is fun. That's exciting. Isaiah Pacheco provided a spark. He runs hard. He runs fast. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, it's going to be a snap and a rush percentage share between Pacheco, CEH, and McKinnon. You're banking on a touchdown if you play him. I'm not doing that. Now, Juju Smith-Schuster is probably out there or is probably rostered already. But don't chase Hardman. That's not going to be sustainable. He will have weeks like that. Don't chase that, though. Please don't do that. That is not sustainable. This wide receiver that I went out and got because he is showing promise, and it's very under the radar promise too. He led the team in air yards last week, and I think overall this year he leads the team as wide receiver in air yards. That's Marcus Valdes-Scantling. That's the wide receiver that go out and get now. He is going to have a lot better games. I get it. He's probably a boom bust. He is their deep threat. He is the speedster, not Hardman. I know Hardman's the speedster, but he's using different ways for the offense. MVS is the guy that's a sneaky go grab right now, especially for the bye weeks. He could have good weeks. On the Chargers, again, they're going to a bye. But here's the guys you don't need me to tell you to have. Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett. You already have them. I know half of those guys are hurt, which really sucks. The Chargers have awful luck when it comes to players being injured. I really hate it. Those are all guys you're playing when they're healthy, yes. Williams is hurt, so a guy also going in on bye. That, because Allen's also hurt, dealing with the hamstring. I think his hamstrings are now made of silly string. He has the Julio Jones hamstring problem right now. Go out and get Josh Palmer. If he is out there in your league, if he's on the waiver wire, go get Josh Palmer and stash him. Because coming out the bye, he's going to be the top pass catcher, top wide receiver for the Chargers. That has value. With Kelly on IR, the backup to Eckler is Sony Michel. It's really kind of gross, but I get it. It's a high-flying offense. I would take Michel, not Isaiah Spiller. Don't believe what the preseason hype was. We are now not in preseason hype. Okay, the Rams. Off a bye, if you have Stafford and you kept him, you're probably still playing him. Like Aaron Rodgers is gross. It's a gross thing. They're not doing well, but here's to hoping. I'm excited to start only 2 players on this team. Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee. That's the list. Henderson, it does take over this job with Cam Akers potentially have played his last for the Rams and going to only get, traded, hopefully. They hope. The player to push Henderson, though, is Kyron Williams. You want a guy to really stash for later. Now, the Rams have a very bad run schedule for the rest of the season. So I'm not expecting a whole lot out of their backfield, but those are the 2 guys I would actually look at if you're doing so. If you haven't dropped Allen Robinson, you're either going to keep him. I would say drop him, be done. Unless you want to see what they come out with the buy from, I would just drop him. But if you want to see, I get that. I don't fault you for that. Vegas, the Raiders. Yep. Again, Carr, decent late round QB, already rostered. You don't need me to tell you that. You don't need me to tell you to play Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, or if he's healthy, Darren Waller. Those guys are already done. Hunter Renfrow, if he's back healthy, he plays more. He's probably a flex play, depending on what your team needs are. The guy that I want to keep an eye on and potentially stash if I roster room and if I have a need for it is Zamir White. That's the running back. I don't think Jacobs is going to keep his production value the way it is. Zamir White's the guy that I think if anything happens to Jacobs, it's White. That's going to get the work here. Matt Collins is a guy that if Renfrow does get hurt, we already saw it. It's going to be flex worthy for Matt Collins, depending on the opponent. And if Waller still is hurt, Foster Moreau's the tight end to stream. Again, stream like 3/4 of the tight ends. Stream them. Just go by matchup. That's fine. What's available? Who's available? There are lots available. They're not all great. I'm sorry. Tight end position, honestly, you should be rid of the tight end position in your league. Talk to your commissioner about that. Miami, of course, Tua, Hill, Waddle, and Mostert. Gesicki, if you want to stream one. Those are the guys. We don't need to go over that. That's a duh. Edmonds is a handcuff. Edmonds may have some value. Edmonds is a guy, though, that if Mostert goes down and he's a fragile running back, he then has more value. Minnesota, Cousins like Carr, late round QB, very good ad, very good value. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. You already have Alexander Madison handcuffed. Those are the guys you don't need to be talking about. But yet sometimes we talk about these guys. Don't make fantasy football hard. Okay? A guy that's a sneaky stash here, though, is KJ Osborne. If something happens to Adam Thielen, and again, we've talked about a couple offenses already about high-flying offense, good pass catcher, the third guy. KJ Osborne fits all that mold. If something happens to Thielen, KJ Osborne elevates to the second wide receiver and has more value. Irv Smith is the streamer 2 for this team. In New England, what can we say? Is it Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi is going to lead the quarterback room? We don't know. We say it's Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi. To me, it doesn't matter. Mac Jones is a better quarterback than Bailey Zappi. But coaches don't always play the better players. We get frustrated at that being fantasy football players. Play the better players. That doesn't always happen. The wide receiver I want is Jacoby Myers. I'm maybe stashing Tyquan Thornton, but that's a deep league stash only. I'm not starting the tight ends. If you have Ramondre Stevenson, you love life. You also are nervous a little bit about Damian Harris coming back. Those are the players you need to pay attention to. New Orleans. I hope it's Wilson. We just found out it's Dalton this week, but who knows? Could be Taysom Hill. I spoke to that earlier. Could be Taysom Hill taking some key snaps at quarterback for this team. So this week, especially, Las Vegas is the worst against quarterback position. That is something to keep in mind. If you want to hear my real take on Taysom Hill, go listen to the preview show for week 7. I highlighted it there. So listen to that if you really want my full take on Taysom Hill. I'm out on Mike Thomas. I said it with the question though. I'm out on Michael Thomas. I don't even know if you can trust him playing the rest of the year. I don't know if he's going to be healthy. The one pass catcher I really like is Chris Olave. He has led the league in air yards for weeks. It is Chris Olave. He has better value if Jameis Winston is his quarterback. I will stream Juwan Johnson, especially with Adam Trautman out. You don't need me to talk about Alvin Kamara. I'm not chasing Tre'Quan Smith. I'm not chasing Marcus Callaway. Mark Ingram is a potential stash and add if you need a handcuff for him. But again, it's an aging running back in a bad offense. I really am not excited about it. The Giants. Well, we all saw the Giants going 6-1, didn't we? Yep. You saw that, right? Nope. Me either. That's okay. We get it wrong. But fun fact, did you know Daniel Jones has more rushing yards than Jalen Hurts and more rushing yards than Najee Harris this year? Wow. Fantastic. Daniel Jones should be a streamer in 1 QB league. Especially 2 QB, he should be starting. Come on. Let's quit the narrative on Daniel Jones can't play. Let's enjoy it. I don't care if he's a good real-life NFL quarterback. Real-life NFL quarterbacks that are not good are still fantasy relevant, a.k.a. Blake Bortles. Just remember that. Yeah, I'd rather stream Daniel Jones than Aaron Rodgers, by the way. It's just more FYI. Saquon Barkley is the back you want. For wide receivers out of this team, it's Wan'Dale Robinson. He's the number 1. He's the guy I want. And I'm not really chasing Darius Slayton on this team. Again, number 1 wide receivers, bad offense. I don't go beyond that. Decent offenses, you go 2. Great offenses, you go 2, but potentially 3. For a streaming tight end, Daniel Bellinger. Not much more needs to be said. We'll say in the state of New York, or they play in New Jersey, though, but we'll say in New York. And despite the play of Zach Wilson, the Jets are winning. I don't like Zach Wilson as a quarterback option for fantasy. I think it's a low play. This team is not passing like they were with Joe Flacco. But again, that is my opinion. Breece Hall goes down. Every fantasy football manager has a moment of silence for Breece Hall. Every single one. Not if you had him or not. He is an amazing back. He could be the next LaDainian Tomlinson for this league. The Jets, that, as I mentioned, James Robinson to their team from Jacksonville. And with that, the narrative is at James Robinson, Michael Carter's value goes down. Well, Michael Carter's value goes down a little bit, but I think Michael Carter is the guy you still want. Michael Carter was productive last year without Breece Hall. He was also getting a 50% snap share with Breece Hall in there, and he had goal line work. He's been on the team. He is the guy you want. Go buy the dip. Go get Michael Carter, not James Robinson. James Robinson is this 1B to this backfield, not the 1A. 4 pass catchers. Elijah Moore's out. He and the team have differences. That leaves to me, I'm not chasing Corey Davis. I'm after Garrett Wilson. If the fantasy manager that has Garrett Wilson in your league is down on Garrett Wilson because he has not seen the production since the 30-point game in Cincinnati, go acquire him now. This is the time to go get him. Garrett Wilson could be the guy that turns to a wide receiver 2 from a bench player to your league team this year. Do not get fooled. Go chase the hype. And Tyler Conklin's probably the tight end you're streaming, but it's either Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzoma. I'm not sure, and I don't like guessing like that because then you guess wrong always. In Philly, last remaining undefeated team. This one's pretty straightforward. You already have all the guys you need. Got it. Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Miles Sanders. There's the list. If you want to handcuff, it's Gainwell. But that really is if pending, and we don't bet on injuries, but pending Sanders goes down. That's it. Pittsburgh. It's been frustrating for Pittsburgh. Deontay Johnson's frustrating, but you're still starting him. Najee Harris is very frustrating, but you are probably still starting him because there's not a better option on your team for running back as far as a running back 1. But he is just, you have to be ready for, he is not going to be an RB1 this year. He is an RB2 that you drafted as an RB1. It sucks. It hurts. We move on though. I'm also adding, or if he's out there, I'm going to get him, but I think it's more startable is George Pickens. I'm not chasing Chase Claypool. This is a guy that you're never going to get right. You're going to start him the week after he goes, boom, and he's going to bust, and you're going to hate life. Don't do that to yourself. Pat Freiermuth, again, streaming tight end. Probably a high-end streamer, but it's streaming tight end. It's a frustrating team because they are not living up to what we are used to the Steelers doing, but we should have seen that. The Steelers are a team that we should have seen what they're doing. We should have paid attention to that, and we should remember that next year. And I will try to remember this and bring this up in preseason next year of what are the teams that are pointing us to say, don't draft players high on this team. They're going to disappoint because it points to that. Kenny Pickett is a streamer in 2 QB leagues as well. San Fran kind of touched on this a little bit with Brandon Ayuk. It looks a little different than we thought it was going to. They have CMC, so that means you're starting him. Elijah Mitchell becomes a very high value handcuff over Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson also becomes a handcuff because they will use committee, but CMC is going to be the guy that gets the majority of the workload. We just don't know how much yet because he was acquired 2 days and then they played, so they gave him limited reps. I get it. Deebo Samuel has not been what he was last year. He has had rushing opportunities taken away, and with acquiring CMC, that's only going to hurt him more. Brandon Ayuk is also being out-targeted with Jimmy Garoppolo than Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is the guy you're starting, but like Najee, you're not getting what you drafted him at. And it hurts. It sucks. We deal with it. We move on. George Kittle is an obvious start. There's really not much more to say to that. Garoppolo is a streaming option. There's no other than you're holding Mitchell, you're holding Wilson. The patience that you took with Kittle is paying off because he got the boom week last week, and it's paying off in a big way the rest of this year. Hopefully he stays healthy for that. Seattle, and of course we knew this team was going to be leading the NFC West. Yeah, we knew that. Oh wait, no, we didn't. Now, again, reminder: we don't know everything when we are drafting and when the season is there. You can stream. You can play Geno Smith almost weekly. Yeah, actually, I like him better than Aaron Rodgers too. There are a lot of quarterbacks I like better than Aaron Rodgers. Spoiler. Um, Kenneth Walker. I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. It's the Kenneth Walker show. He should never have been the waiver wire darling because he should have already been on your team. Don't miss out because you don't pay attention to key details. Kenneth Walker provided those key details before it was his time. Metcalf's out for a few weeks, potentially with his knee. He doesn't need surgery, but that could be worse for him playing week by week. Lockett's also hurt, nursing hamstrings. For the next few weeks, I like Marquise Goodwin. He had 2 touchdowns. He is the guy that is the number 2 when Lockett or Metcalf are out. He fulfills that role really well. The tight end also position on this one is really interesting. Fant is creeping in on the production of Will Dissly, but that means now they're cannibalizing each other's targets. So until that's figured out, I want no part of it. Tennessee, it's Henry. Right now, that's it. You're not playing Tannehill. If there's a guy right now you're playing as a wide receiver, it's Bobby Trees. Okay. But that's a flex guy. That's not high leverage guy right there. If there's a guy that I'm going to go add or find out, see if he's on the waiver because somebody dropped him, is Treylon Burks because this team needs wide receiver production. Burks will provide that when he's off IR. Don't go out to best case scenario with the backups of Derrick Henry either. Derrick Henry, if he goes down, we don't bet on it. We don't hope for injury. If he does, don't go out to best case scenario. That will not happen with a backup of Derrick Henry. It just won't. For Washington, this will be the final team. And man, we're getting this under an hour. Long show, but I appreciate those that have jumped on and asked questions. Ask questions. I will try to reply to them as you see this. But for Washington, the Commanders are a hot mess. Wentz is benched. Heineke showed he can still be relevant. Great. That's awesome. But Heineke's a 2 QB streamer. That's it. Like this week's a good week. You could use him or not. If you needed one, you could. But McLaurin, similar to like guys like Pittman, guys like Sutton, where the backup comes in, he targets the number 1 guy, so that helps. But at the same time, the offense is so limited. It's disgusting. It's gross. I don't like it. If you can trade McLaurin away at this point, I would do that if I get fair value for him, though. I need fair value back. The backfield is a mess. The guy I want to have is Antonio Gibson. I still don't want to start any of these guys. I love the story of Brian Robinson. It's a fantastic story, but if we're looking at players and being subjective with it, Gibson's the better running back than both J.D. McKissick and Brian Robinson. They don't play it that way, though. And so because of that, if you have one, they're on your bench. They're not trustworthy. Logan Thomas is another streaming tight end. Curtis Samuel is a stash that he booms, but it looks different than it did in the early weeks that we really liked him. So just remember that. So that's it. That's all the teams, players, and situations, my opinions. Again, this is not the typical waiver type of show this week. I really wasn't excited that. If you're wondering why, again, like I said, I'm not excited about it. I want to give names that excite you, that help your team. This week was not that week. This week either had guys that were rostered in many leagues that's like, well, yeah, of course they are. Or it's guys that are not, but they're not providing the value to your team that you need. So I don't like it. It doesn't excite me. I mean, I would have told you guys, Chuba Hubbard, Dante Foreman, of course. Go out get those guys, but I'm not giving you the ancillary pass catchers from Indianapolis. That's not good process, especially knowing it's Brett Ellinger as quarterback. So I also tell you to go get Josh Palmer. Go get MVS. If they're out there, go get them. Those are the types of guys I would have said. So if you really want to know what I would have said, that's it. But again, that's all for today. Thanks for joining. Thanks for the questions. Have a good week. I will see you later in the week for the preview show for week 8. We'll see you. No.